Congress right now.
Oh my gosh.
You're known as being a
Among who?
reformer. Among the reformers, those
Yeah.
that want real change in government.
Mhm.
My kids are experts in transparency. They know that it's important. They know that we don't need to go back to pre-recession levels of budgeting for our government. They're well informed and they have a ton of great questions for you.
Great, thank you,
And we take them
Kelly,
out for
very
you,
much.
too.
And I've heard a lot about Be It Kids, and I've seen all the people that have come to talk to you, and I've been waiting my turn patiently. And finally, Kelly gave me an invitation. And a little bit about myself. I'll talk for about 5–10 minutes and then take questions. Is that okay, Kelly, in terms of format? I've been married for 26 years. I have 3 kids, 3 daughters, one 17, one 10, one 6. So I've got a lot of parenting ahead of me. Before becoming state senator in 2008, I was Governor Sanford's chief of staff. I ran Governor Sanford's campaign back in 2002. Since I had gone to college with him at Furman a long time ago, he had asked me to do that. I left to run for Senate in 2008, and then a year and a half later, I like to refer to it as the day the music died. And we learned all about the Argentina trip, and a person that I felt really kind of was carrying the conservative banner went down in flames. And it was unfortunate, but the rest of us have kind of picked up and tried to carry on. What I want to talk to you about right now is what I see to be the true battle in state government right now. It's not really between the Democrats and the Republicans, and it's not really between the legislature and the governor. What I think the battle is between the state and the power exercised by the state and people and the free market. And let me give you an example of what I mean by that. In 1998, state government gave away $34 million a year to specific companies. It went to certain companies and said, we like what you're doing, we like your business ideas, here's $34 million worth of tax breaks, grants, subsidies, favors, whatnot. In 2008, the amount of money that was given away by state government was $523 million a year to those companies. This year, it's over $1 billion a year that's being passed out selectively by government to certain companies. And to give you an idea of how big that number is, our budget this year is going to be about $5.6 billion. So out of a $5.6 billion, we're giving away $1 billion in special tax breaks or subsidies or grants to certain companies that hire lobbyists that come up and convince legislators to create exemptions for them in the tax code. I think that's fundamentally wrong. I mean, what government is supposed to do is provide for public safety, a civil justice system, roads, schools, various things that you really expect and need government to do. But when did it become acceptable for government to take tax dollars from all the citizens and then decide who to hand that money out to, what companies to give it to? And to give you an example, one thing that was proposed last year was that a new shopping mall company down where I represent in Beaufort County was going to come in and build a luxury shopping mall down in Bluffton, South Carolina, outside Hilton Head. And they had a piece of legislation introduced that would have the state treasury pay that company $175 million to help build its mall. Now, how is that fair to all the other shops that are up and down in that area that are having to pay their own mortgage, having to pay for their own overhead? And that got defeated because you pointed out that it wasn't fair. But that sort of mentality is really where the argument is these days. Do you really want state government to be taking tax dollars and then passing it out on a selective basis to corporations who have the best lobbyists who can go up there and get special breaks? And there's a lot of people that up there, Republicans and Democrats, that say, yeah, that's what government ought to do. It ought to be out there. It ought to see who the emerging companies are. It ought to kind of look forward and see what they think the new technologies are going to be, and then provide them with special treatment. There are other folks, myself included, that believe the marketplace will decide that. The marketplace will decide what company has the best ideas. Consumers, by buying products, will decide what companies deserve to prosper. And that is a better indicator of excellence and companies that deserve to thrive, having consumers decide in the marketplace instead of government deciding for you. So that's the basic debate right now, and I think that's the debate you're going to see going forward over the next couple of 3 years, is whether or not government ought to be involved in the economy, to spur growth, to create jobs, or whether or not it should go ahead and let the private sector do that. And again, it's not a Republican or Democrat issue, because there's lots of Republicans that feel the way I do. Some Democrats feel the way I do. Some don't. Some believe the state ought to be involved. I very squarely fall on the grounds of that the free market is always going to determine what companies ought to succeed. If you got the best product, if you've got something that's worthwhile, people will buy it. People will reward you by going there and paying for it. And that's the best measure out there of whether what you're doing is worthwhile. Because people spending money out of their wallets is a much better indicator of how good a product is than 170 elected politicians up in Columbia looking at a company and saying, well, we think you ought to deserve special treatment. So that's what we're working on right now. I think that's going to dominate the debate over the next couple of years. With that, I'm going to stop and I'm going to answer questions. I see that there's 8 questions written here. Should I read them out loud and then respond to them, Kelly, or should I just...
The students were going to introduce themselves, tell you what they plan on doing when they graduate from high school.
Okay.
And we have a couple extra that they added, if we get to them.
Sure. Okay. Who's first? Yes, sir.
My name's Kyle Carpenter.
Kyle, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I'm 17. I have no idea what I'm going to be doing after high school.
I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was in college, so...
Given the fact you were Governor Sanford's legislative liaison and Governor Sanford was not able to win the support of the legislator, how have you been so successful in doing that for yourself?
Because I think Mark, or Governor Sanford, had the wrong approach. I think he went up there and thought that he could lay out a rational argument to the legislature and say, see, doesn't this make sense? Pass this law because here's why it makes sense. And then sit down and to kind of explain it through. They're not going to change what they do that way. The only way you're going to change what goes on in Columbia is not by making better arguments to legislators. It's by going out to the grassroots, going out to people all over the state, letting them know what's going on up in Columbia, and then having them put direct pressure on their representatives and senators to change their votes. That's the only way real change is going to occur. I mean, I was Mark's legislative liaison, chief of staff, and I used to think that if you had the best idea, and if you had a great argument, you could sit down with a legislature and make your case, and they would nod their head and say, gee, Tom, that makes a lot of sense. You're right. I'll cast my vote that way. It doesn't work that way. The only thing that's going to make them change their vote is if they believe that people back home won't re-elect them unless they change their vote. And so what's happened is we've moved our focus from trying to make the argument in the State House to going out all over the state. You know, to Greenville, to Spartanburg, Myrtle Beach, Aiken. I mean, I've been all over the state kind of preaching this conservative grassroots gospel. And then encouraging those individuals to network among themselves. And that's the other thing that's really changed in the last 10 years. Think of social media. Think of Facebook. Think of Twitter. Those things didn't exist, or at least I didn't know about them in 2003 and 2004. And there really wasn't a way for people outside the system to communicate with each other, to organize, to have events, and then to apply pressure. So I think that's the big difference, is that you turn your focus away from trying to make arguments to legislators to change their mind, to going directly to the people, making the case, and then letting them use social media tools like Tumblr or Twitter or Facebook or any other of these multiplicity of social media platforms, and it's working. I mean, you saw it in regard to the transparency vote. I know Governor Haley's been in here talking about that, I believe. She got pressure built up out there in the grassroots to make legislators put all their votes on the record. They didn't want to do that. They absolutely did not want to do that and weren't going to do that unless the people demanded it. And guess what? Through her going out there and a whole lot of other people going out there and making this case and then having them communicate with each other and then putting pressure back on their representatives and senators, we got this thing done. So I think that's the main difference between what I did when I was legislative liaison and chief of staff for Sanford and what I see happening now in the General Assembly.